Daryl Fairweather is the chief economist at Redfin. Daryl, great to have you back on the program. Last time we talked, it was a lot about the young buyer, the millennial buyer. I know you guys have continued to do research on this, and it remains a big topic. Is it looking as robust as expectations?
Well, we haven't seen millennials come back to the housing market the way that previous generations did. And we know from our own internal research that millennials don't see buying a home as good as an investment as investing in stocks as previous generations did. So millennials are more likely to view stocks as a safer investment relative to housing, whereas older generations still think of housing as being that really safe investment, whether the market is doing well or doing poorly. That's how older generations think of housing, but not necessarily younger ones.
What's interesting is now you've got kind of this question of, all right, you've got lower mortgage rates, so that should help. But it sounds like to me, from especially the younger generation, that holdback may not necessarily be raised, but more just down payment, having liquidity to do so.
Well, a down payment is one of the first things that you think about when buying a home and setting that price range. Usually the down payment sets what that price point is, but then when you actually start looking at your monthly budget, thinking about how much money is going to housing, how much money is going to go to transportation or food or other costs, that's when that monthly mortgage payment starts to look really big. But a lower mortgage interest rate makes that monthly payment much lower and makes it seem like you can afford more home.
From your guys' data, is it possible to kind of paint housing with a broad brush, or do you have to get specific for regions, demographic as well? I know we hear a lot about housing prices, quote unquote, coming down still, but it seems like that's really in the frothiest parts of the market.
Housing is local, so a market like San Francisco is so different from a market like Akron, Ohio. Just a few years ago, a place like the Bay Area, San Francisco, that's where we saw the fastest price growth. But now the fastest price growth is in places like Akron, Ohio, or in other places in the center of the country. And what's interesting is that you can break out the market by the lower price point versus the higher price point. The lower bottom third of priced homes, that's where prices are growing the fastest. And that's because people, as the economy is doing better, are trying to get into the market, trying to get that starter home, and everyone is competing against each other for those starter homes. Whereas the luxury end of the market, that's slowed down the most.
Daryl, when I look at your guys' analysis of what you see in terms of the communication between agents and customers, what's the trend? Is there a pickup? Have we, though, at least seen interest build since rates started plummeting?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of interest. A lot of buyers are talking to our agents saying that now is a good time to buy, and it is picking up. So we're seeing people going on home tours more often, and they're having more success. They're more likely to get their first offer accepted, and they're less likely to face bidding wars right now than they were this time last year. The only exception, I would say, again, is the Bay Area. All those tech IPOs are starting to heat that market back up, but it's still not nearly as competitive as it was this time last year.
Do you see the enough demand for the inventory to come online? I mean, I know there's kind of this push and pull of there being demand to, bring inventory online, but then it's all right for the housing, the home builders, is it profitable enough for them to do so? How is that shaking out? Do you see more homes getting built? I mean, do you see this continuing?
So ever since the last housing crash, there hasn't been enough new construction to keep pace with the number of people who want to buy homes, with the number of households that are growing out there. And what's happened is that there's really a shortage of homes, and whenever there's more demand, the only thing that can happen is for prices to go up because people are competing for the same homes and they're having bidding wars and bidding those prices up. The one thing that I'll say is optimistic is that it seems like this issue is getting more national attention and statewide attention. So we've seen in Oregon, for example, just yesterday, that they are going to basically ban single-family zoning, or it looks like they're going to ban that. And that will do a lot to increase the supply of housing, because if you can build more units on the same plot of land that you would just have one unit, you have more housing and you have more starter homes for people to really get their foot in the door into home ownership.
One of the things that jumped out to me is the stat you guys have about the number of homes for sale. Am I right in seeing this at 2.5%? Seems like a pretty small bump for the month of May, obviously, in which we had this big drop off in the cost of your mortgage rates.
Yeah, so back in fall when interest rates were really high, homes were sitting on the market and inventory was starting to pile up, but that inventory is starting to dwindle. And now there really aren't enough homes for sale for everybody who wants them. And I think looking forward into the rest of summer, we're going to see more competition, and the only place for things to go is for prices to go up.
So 2.5% was the smallest increase in 8 months?
Yeah, that's right. Just a really small increase relative to the increases we've seen in the beginning of this year and the end of last year.
Wow. All right. And then one more thing before we let you go, Daryl, because I thought this was interesting as well. As it pertains to what's coming in 2020, the election, we don't do a lot of political analysis, but I imagine that there might be some housing, impact here. Is this something that could actually be a meaningful catalyst for the space over the next year?
All of the candidates are talking about housing, and Donald Trump is talking about housing too. He even put out an executive order trying to do something about increasing the supply of housing by changing zoning laws. And this is something that's going across the aisle too. Cory Booker has a pretty similar plan to get the national government involved in changing these zoning laws by using the power of the purse. But there are a lot of differences. So someone like Elizabeth Warren, for example, is looking at zoning in terms of its historical relevance and how U.S. policy in the past has benefited white homeowners versus black homeowners and trying to undo that. So it seems like housing really is an issue that is going to distinguish each of the candidates because they all have a slightly different approach to solve this affordable housing problem.
All right. Well, we got a bunch of people to go through first, I guess, till we find out if it becomes a market catalyst. Daryl, really good stuff. We'll continue the conversation as it develops. Really appreciate you being here.